Hello and welcome to this lesson on how to write an application vulnerable to default credentials. Now, the specifications required to pass this task is you need to create a web application with a login page. We need to hard code administrator credentials into the configuration file, and also go to write and document and inform people with the new default credentials. So have a look at that and just look around, and there's some resources. There's references, what default credentials vulnerability is, and there's also the five most common network vulnerabilities default login credentials. Now, it's worth to have a look at these references, but basically have a look at these. There's only 3 actions to be taken, very simple. But let's have a look at the agenda first. So the agenda is we're going to be covering what are defaulted credentials. We're going to be also covering how does a default credential vulnerability occur, as well as some examples and how do we remediate this? How can we fix a default credential vulnerability? Then we'll go through a technical demonstration. So what are default credentials? Default credentials goes under the OWASP top 10 as security misconfiguration. It's ASIC security misconfiguration. And it is taken advantage of by exploiting unpatched flaws or access default accounts, unprotected files and directories, unused pages to gain unauthorized access to accounts. Think of it as an example when you've got a new router and you've got your internet, you put a new router in and you just use internet and you didn't set anything up, you just went next, set up next. You just went through all the installation and forgot the most important part, and that is to change the default password to a secure one. So many routers come with default credentials. Usually they're admin and password, but we'll have a look at a website where we can look at a whole heap of default passwords with most vendors. And we can also learn to brute force with Metasploit a protected account that has default credentials. And here's another scenario. Okay, so directory listings is not disabled on a server. An attacker discovers this through, the recon, and they can list all the directories. And they find there's a downloads directory with all the compiled Java classes. Now, what can they do with that? They can download all that, and they can decompile the Java classes, reverse engineer it, and then they can find out where the access control flaw is in the application. It's really cool. Another one is, how does a default credential vulnerability occur? Well, it's simply a security misconfiguration, and it can happen at any level or at an application stack, including the network services, platform, web server, application server, database, frameworks, custom code, and pre-installed virtual machines, containers, or storage. Automated scanners are useful for detecting misconfigurations used of default accounts or configurations, unnecessary services, legacy options. So what that means is a lot of products, a lot of pages, like custom code, databases, containers like Kubernetes or Elasticsearch come with already packaged default settings, and we can actually reverse engineer that or find out what we can do to access those pages that have either default passwords or are typically not unauthenticated. They might just not be unauthenticated. You can be able to access those stuff unauthenticated. It might have any authentication at all. So some examples of common default credentials. So Shodan has some great searches you can use to find unprotected services credentials that are just default. And unauthenticated Kubernetes API Shodan has a really cool search called product : Kubernetes on port 2250. And that shows you a lot of servers that have Kubernetes open and exposed for anyone. And then you can use Docker to actually connect to the instance and access one of the containers and cause remote code execution, which I've reported on one of these most really common programs to report vulnerabilities. It's called HackerOne, and it's really cool. Let's have a good look at that. This is really good to look at. It's very fun. So if we go to Shodan, just got to load Shodan up. Wrong one. So here's Shodan right here. I've actually just bring up the example as unauthenticated Udo manager. And I've typed in this query right here, http.component, as this : Udo, and then space http.status : 200, because we're looking for any components with Udo, and then we're looking for 200 OK status codes. Let's have a look at one. Let's have a look at this first one here. Let's open up in a new tab. And as you can see, I've got this little nice little recon cheat sheet made by Mo Chen. He's a really good hacker. And he said with the Odoo manager, you access this endpoint and you should be able to access, without having credentials, one of the databases. Let's go here. And all I need to do, I'm not going to do anything bad, but all we need to do is access that right there. I'm not going to do it. And you'll access the endpoint with the Odoo manager, and it will be unauthenticated. So you won't even have to require a password. But sometimes it says, it requires a password, and it's either admin, or no password at all. That's another one that has default credentials. Same as an unauthenticated Jenkins instance. If that has script enabled, if that has a script /script endpoint, we can cause remote code execution. We can execute code. Another one is, let's have a look, unauthenticated Docker. So Docker has exposed Docker, which is you put in a / version and expose the Docker instance, and then you'll be able to connect to it, cause remote code execution. These are unauthenticated APIs kind of thing. Let's get that up. Another good resource for looking at default passwords is like this website here. It's called cert.net. And if you just search for, say, let's search for Cisco. It shows you a list of commonly default passwords to Cisco. Here you go. Cisco device 110. The password is Cisco, and the user ID is none. So that means it has no username, but it has a password to Cisco, and level you get access to is administrator. Also, Cisco 120 has a default username password of Cisco, and the level you get access to is administrator. These are really good to look at as well. And here's a good write-up about a person that found a security misconfiguration with using default passwords. And he said all we needed to do is just type in Cisco, and then the password I think was either one of these. So these are some of the, it might have been administrator since it looks so long. And you just got access to that because this Cisco CVR 100W wireless N router had default credentials of Cisco administrator. And you can look at that page too as well. And if you're interested in Shodan to finding nice unauthenticated flaws or security misconfigurations of any sort, here's some nice search queries to actually get so you learn how to use it. So here's actually really useful. You can look at red lights, you can look at cameras, you can look at unauthenticated, webcams and stuff like that. But also there's a cheat sheet. This is also like a, I think I can find it, Shodan syntax. It shows you how to use Shodan for your recon. I'm pretty sure it is there somewhere, but I'm not going to make that in this lesson because I feel like it's not going to be involved around Shodan. That Shodan is just for explaining some of the issues that you can come across. And here's a really good write-up, AS, it's called awasp.org, and it shows you what security misconfiguration is. Even shows you some references to really good tools and stuff like that. Back to the slide. So how can default credentials be remediated? Well, we can remediate this by making a safe, secure installation. So we install with the right, correct settings and with passwords and etc. We can harden it. We can harden the environment. We can also configure everything set properly. We can also, as it says here, we can repeatable hardening process that makes it fast and easy to deploy another environment that is properly locked down. Development in production environments should be configured identically with different credentials used in each environment. So we make sure that each environment has a separate password with strong credentials. This process should be automated to minimize the effort required to set up new secure environments. Also, minimal platform without any unnecessary features like components, documentation, and samples. Remove or do not install unused features and frameworks. So another one is we make sure we have the correct security directives, like the security headers, etc. Because if we don't have the correct security headers, we can bypass some of those headers by putting like X forwarded host and local host, and we can bypass to access we can bypass a 403 page and get access to an account of some sort. And also an automated process to verify the effectiveness of the configurations and settings in all environments. So make sure you do like some sort of test or a vulnerability scanning network, see everything's secure. Okay, so in this demonstration, I'm going to be showing you a simple security misconfiguration that will be able to successfully brute force an administrator password. And we're going to be using Dan Vulnerable Web App for this. This is an example of Dan Vulnerable Web App, and it has an insecure username password. So let's capture this request. Let's just go here, and let's just type in anything, just so we can then capture the request, and we can get this. We want to brute force these parameters here. So if we send it to the repeater, Control R, send a repeater, or right click go repeater, and we see that the error message we get back is username and/or password is incorrect. So we need to copy that. That's got to be what we're going to grep for. And we send this to the intruder, and make sure we set these as our variables that we're going to placing our payloads in. Make sure that cluster bomb is set. And here we go. This is where we need to set our payloads. Before we do anything though, make sure your encoding is turned off. Make sure we clear the grep match and only match for this one here. This one there. And for the payloads, we're just going to put in admin, password, and we'll just do those. Okay. And then we're going to just start the attack. Obviously, we need to also paste it into our second payload and paste it in. And we go to start attack and see what we get back. So here you go. So if you see something interesting, these first three contain the username password is incorrect in response. Also, the last one. But what stands out here, and these are also the same content lengths, but this one here is a different content length, meaning that we have logged in to the page. And as you can see here, the message will be something different. It will say, welcome to the password protected area admin. So now we know that username is admin and the password is password. So let's try that out without proxy turned on. Let's try admin and password. We are logged into the protected admin area. That's a simple brute force attack with a security misconfiguration. Obviously, in a real life application, you would have a huge word list. You might use your GPU for making your graphics card brute force really quickly. But that's a very basic example. Now, for the PHP configuration part, I'm going to show you a misconfiguration in the PHP of Dan Vulnerable Web App. And this is something that you can also have a look at and understand where you might want to work out your lesson and work out the solution to your the assessment. So usernames, crypt, and I need to find out where. I'm just finding it out here. So if we go here to our example, like where our Dan Vulnerable Web App is set up, Dan Vulnerable Web App. And as you can see here, this is PHP info file. That's nothing of interest, but then you go into the configuration and we see that there's this config.inc.php. And this here contains the default credentials for Dan Vulnerable Web App. And as you can see, it's got the database management system MySQL and it's got an array with all the default credentials. That's very bad. Having that is very bad. You make sure you encrypt your passwords and stuff on the database, on the back end, and even on the front end. But you shouldn't store passwords on the front end at all, even through client-side code. Very bad. Also wanted to show you the configuration file for that Dan Vulnerable Web App page. So if we go to the directory that has the Dan Vulnerable Web App's configuration, which is set up in XAMPP. If I go to HTTP docs, Dan Vulnerable Web App, and I go to vulnerabilities, and I go to brute, this is going to have all the the PHP code for that lesson. So here's an example of a vulnerable page that is vulnerable to brute force. There's a misconfiguration in this page, but I'm not going to show you all of that just because I don't want to give away the lesson. So there's also like help.php and source, and this is the different source, different difficulties. So here's an example of the PHP code that is vulnerable. Obviously, you can follow the this part here. This is the downloaded web page to root, and this would include all the credentials. So very, very bad. Yeah, that's an example of code. I'm not going to show the full code just because I don't want to give away the lesson. But you know, having my PHP code and all the passwords sitting there and only checking for hard-coded passwords that aren't encrypted is very bad. So this concludes the lesson. I hope you enjoyed this lesson on misconfigurations. You know, thank you for so much of being part of the community. You guys are legends. And until next time, I will see you soon. Bye-bye.